Hello and welcome back to Bastion and Broadcasting, where tonight we are jumping back into where we left off last week, and we are looking at a game called Wanderhome. So I've already done a video last week talking about this game and what makes this game different. It's a game by J Dragon. I'm not going to repeat everything I said last week, because the reason I've revisited this is because I want to actually spend a bit of time digging into the game and actually playing it. But the very brief overview is that this is a game that operates under the no dice, no masters philosophy. So the clue is in the name, really. There are no dice, and there is typically no GM. You can play with a GM in this game, but you can also play without. And obviously I will be playing solo. And as you can see, we've got some notes here from our solo game that we started last week, and I'm really interested to keep going, because it's a very different type of game than the type of games that I normally make and the type of games that I normally play, but there's a lot of interesting stuff, and I'm trying to think of a way to say this without sounding like dead pretentious, but I think it's always good to push yourself out of your comfort zone and try things out that are different. And I think with role-playing games especially, something like this is very different to something like, let me think of an extreme example, something that's very kind of mechanical. I don't know why this suddenly came to mind, but something like, say, Lancer, which is that mech game that has been very popular, where there's it's all about the numbers and the systems and the mechanics and the kind of the build challenge of it. This is almost entirely about narrative, and you'll see as we play. I'm not gonna overload the front end of this. And Romain said happy birthday, thank you very much. It was a couple of days ago my birthday was, which is why this video is slightly late, because I was having an extended weekend, because unlike last birthday, we were actually able to go somewhere and visit family, and go somewhere for a drink, and go somewhere where somebody would bring food to our table, outside admittedly. But yeah, it was a much better birthday than this time last year. So yeah, that's why we're on a Wednesday night tonight, because last night was still the end of my birthday break, I guess. So back to the point, less about me. Tonight we're interested in Newt the Pilgrim. So let me find the picture, because we basically based this guy pretty much off the picture here, because I thought this was pretty cool. So our pilgrim, who is named Newt. So we're, in this world, we're going with animals that are named after their species, I guess. So we are called Newt. We're following fairy tale logic, or I guess Winnie the Pooh logic. Although now I think about it, why in Winnie the Pooh he's not called Bear, is he? But I guess everyone else is called Owl, Piglet. We're following that rule that has already found the exception that proves the rule. So we are Newt. This is what we got out of our kind of character creation. Some things have come up more than others. A lot of the stuff in this character sheet is kind of it's down to us to make it matter. You could just ignore it. So one thing I want to focus on this week is making sure that we are making the most of every bit of this character sheet here. Because last week I was very much getting to grips with it. So we are a pilgrim. We have given up on being wise and unobtrusive. Now this is a weird one. We've given up on being unobtrusive. It suggests that perhaps in our past we tried to be unobtrusive, but we decided that we are going to not worry too much about being obtrusive, I guess. So this is something I want to try and work in, but I might rephrase this, because that's the seed of an idea, but it's a bit clumsy at the moment. We are trying to be patient and proper. And I'm really going to focus in on the try here, because we're not saying that we are patient and proper. We are trying to be patient and proper, which to me suggests that there is a part of us that is perhaps impatient, and a part of us that is perhaps improper, I suppose. We have our equipment, so we have our weather-beaten hood, and we have the bare minimum needed to get by. So that to me creates a bit of conflict already, because one thing about this game is that there is it's kind of deliberately, it's certainly low violence, this game. And the conflict is kind of very interesting, the way that conflict is presented. It's presented as a world where you can have conflict and there can be problems that you have to overcome and obstacles that you have to overcome. But it's very much pitched as like, look, it's not where you have to go and fight a monster. And that we'll come back to that because that's quite an interesting thing that I want to look into tonight. We have a sturdy walking stick, and we have the brass compass that we received from a white-eyed stranger. And then finally, our pilgrimage is related to this. It's related to sort of two rumours and one truth. So the two rumours that we were following was that the site of our pilgrimage could be located in either a great sky tower, which we decided was somewhere that we had previously been to. That's perhaps where we came from. Or it could be in a monastery with a great teacher. And that is where we sort of started our journey last week. And we met Cayman, who was the great teacher. And Cayman told us pretty much straight up that they don't have any of the answers. We're going to have to go and find the answer ourselves. And so the truth of our pilgrimage is we're seeking the place older than anywhere else in the world, which will either be an island or a ruin, or possibly both. So that's our kind of current situation. Before I dive into the actual game, one thing that I tried to mention this last week, but I couldn't find the little section. One thing that I found really interesting is this little section here. And I am going to read this basically verbatim because I think it's interesting enough that I'm going to read it out. So, nowhere is without problems. When you arrive at a place, you might not yet know what those problems are, but they're still there under the surface. Problems form naturally as natures and kith slam against each other. However, you must remember, you are never going to solve a place's problems. You are travellers from beyond. As welcome as you are, this is not your home, and the locals know far more than you do about how to resolve their struggles and worries. The best you can do is ease pain, tackle short-term challenges, and give someone tools that might someday help out. Be ready and prepared to leave somewhere without resolving any of that place's problems. And this is a really interesting way to look at conflict in this game, because when I first started reading this game about, you're going on a journey and you're going to meet characters and places, it almost feels like my kind of RPG default mind was sort of thinking, okay, so we're going to go into a village, there's going to be a problem in the village, and we're going to solve that problem and then move on, because that kind of feels like a classic kind of structure for a game. But here, the book is basically telling you, like, no, don't do that, because that's not what this game's about. It's not about you being the saviour that comes into the town and resolves all their problems, because, these people live here. If it was as simple as that, they'd have done it themselves. And I like this because it pushes you out of your comfort zone, because it would be so easy to make this a game about just jumping from town to town, being the hero. When in fact it's more about kind of exploring these places and sort of understanding them and, having a good impact where you can. But it's more about your journey. So you have to really look at your character. You're not going to get all your answers from outside. So let's do this. So there is a little guide here. There's a little guide to sort of like what to do on your second. In fact, no. What we're going to do is, last time we played, we were in the month of monsoon, which was very appropriate because it has been a very monsoony week here in the UK, in my bit of the UK anyhow. But we're kind of through it now, so I think it would be a sensible time for us to push forward a month, because I do like how this sort of calendar system works in Wanderhome. So we were in monsoon. So we are going to move into the next season, which is bright, and the next month, which is called Bloom Meadow. So Bloom Meadow is the first month of bright, where all the flowers bloom and pollen fills the air. So we are going to come back to this a little bit later on to give the place that we visit a kind of feel of being in this month. But the question is, where are we? So when we last left Newt, he was on the road, and he was kind of trusting the road, if you like. He was like, he knew where his destination might look like, but he didn't know which direction it lay in, and he decided to just trust the journey, if you like. So what we do is we're going to pick a new location, and to create a location, we're going to pick 3 natures from, where are we? From this list. And I wrote, this sounds like a Patreon plug. It might as well be now. If you go to patreon.com/Bastionland, you can support this channel, and you also get my editorials a week early. But this editorial that I'm talking about now, this will be going on my website tomorrow, on my blog tomorrow. So you'll be able to see it then. But in last week's editorial, I spoke a bit about how this game is kind of like a series of menus, and how my instinct here, when I see 6 categories, and each category has 6 entries, my instinct is to like just roll 2d6 and like let the randomness take me. But by making you actually sort of choose, it's interesting because it means you actually kind of have to look through it like you're looking through a menu in a restaurant. So we're going to choose what seems like an appropriate place for Newt to be traveling through. So we were on a road, and we can still be on a road, but now we're thinking, where is this road taking us to? And we're going to pick 3 natures. So I'm going to start with picking like 2 that kind of give us a general feel of the place, and then we'll see if we can pick a 3rd one to kind of give it a bit of a twist. So I'm being dragged towards moor somehow. Out on the wild and windy moors. It's a quiet place where sharp winds whistle through a stretched out landscape. Lovely. So we haven't got a name for this place yet, but we know it is a moor. And we're going to pick a couple of aesthetic elements from this list. I like the patches of wetland. And I do kind of like a shiver down your back. So perhaps we have left we've left the kind of the safety of Herb Garden, which is the monastery that we were in previously. And the rain had just started to sort of, there was a bit of a break in the rain when we left, because it was in monsoon month. So perhaps as we're moving into spring, the road that we've been following is kind of winding upwards, slightly higher, up into this moor. And this moorland has these patches of sort of bog and wetland that we can see, in these kind of gnarled trees. But we are in the month of Bloom Meadow. So maybe like around those gnarled trees, we are starting to see some flowers are starting to kind of wind up these dead trees. So we're seeing like, I think these soft pink and turquoise flowers is good. Maybe just like a complete sort of cascade of flowers. So yellow and white flowers, pink and turquoise flowers growing in the wetlands. So it's like this quite barren, kind of dead looking place with a chill wind, but there are like little flashes of colour starting to sort of pop through. So in terms of choosing one thing that this place lacks, the others are all present. We're going to say it lacks good cheer because that doesn't make much sense. But we're seeing time to relax, sunny skies, the occasional soggy day. So we'll come back to time to relax, but we're definitely sort of seeing, we've got this sort of contrast of this bleak landscape, but the sun is shining, the flowers are starting to bloom, and we are getting some sort of signs of hope almost, and perhaps that kind of slightly lifts our spirits. I should say the one mechanic in this game does involve sort of tokens. So I feel like I have achieved one of these things where I have taken a moment to bask in the grandeur of the world. Not yet, actually. We'll come back to that. But yeah, we're starting to get a sense of this kind of landscape. But it's not just a moor, is it? We have to pick another kind of nature for this area. And castle sounds interesting. So as the road winds through these dead trees with these flashes of colour from the flowers, there is a castle sort of looming on the horizon. In terms of aesthetics, we're definitely going to have watchtowers. So we can see these kind of turrets dotting the horizon. And long shadows seems to fit quite well. So perhaps the sun is starting to set now. We've been travelling all day, and the sun is sort of setting behind this castle, and it's casting out these long shadows over the moorland. I'm going to pick a bit of folklore. Maybe we've heard something about this place. So maybe we've heard something about the ghost on the parapets. And we can come back to that if we want to. But yeah, the ghost on the parapets is something we will come back to. So this place, we can always do one of these three things. And this is where the game gets a little bit, it's definitely a game about character exploration, which is not necessarily my kind of thing that I go into a game for. But I'm interested to give it a try. So, let me just write down here. Got more in the castle. Describe the walls that surround us. So, so what walls are surrounding Newt the Pilgrim at the moment? So when we left him at Herb Garden, he was looking for his teacher, which he wasn't able to. He found the teacher, but it turned out the teacher didn't have the answers. Why is he a pilgrim? Why is he walling himself off from sort of settling down anywhere? Why is he so committed to sort of travelling on this journey? I think perhaps he's just never quite found a place that feels like somewhere he could settle down. He's never quite felt at home anywhere. And perhaps maybe, again, this is like a full-on cliched thing, but perhaps he did have a place that felt like home. And rather than kind of a dramatic, a dramatic sudden change, perhaps the place just kind of gradually shifted over time. Some people maybe left, some new people arrived, some things changed. And then over the years, he just could have noticed that this place didn't feel like his home anymore. So he kind of, these walls came up around him and he decided to seek the answers elsewhere. So we have our castle and we have our moorland. We choose one more nature for this place. And this is where we can get a little bit kind of a little bit abstract, and I do like that about this game, but it does mean that it kind of forces you to be creative, because I could just say, in addition to this moorland and the castle, there is also a lake, but you can take any of these places and use it in an abstract way. So Mirage is leaping out at me. So a mirage is a place that doesn't really exist. So it could literally be like a vision of some place, but it could also be a bit more abstract. It could just be a place that doesn't exist in the way that you think it does. And likewise, a field is a place to lie back, feel the breeze in your fur, and look up at the sky. It doesn't need to literally be a field. This could be in the middle of a city. But this, the mirage is good, but I'm going to go for mirror, because it kind of feels like this is kind of a reflective kind of place. So a mirror is a place that reflects back onto yourself. So perhaps as we're kind of heading up towards this castle, presumably, to at least see if we can kind of settle down for the night somewhere, we kind of see this wetland does have like these sort of glassy ponds. And as we kind of look into the reflections, there's some kind of like, perhaps it's actually sort of getting, no, because it's not, there wouldn't be ice, I guess, at this time of year. Scratches in the reflection. Perhaps that's kind of just the way that the stones are kind of jutting out of the kind of shallow pools, is that the water's very clear and reflective, but you can't see like a solid reflection. There's sort of jagged stones there interrupting. So this place can always describe what looks back. So Newt looks into his reflection. And I think Newt still sees, I guess, the person that he always used to be, and perhaps feels a little bit of resentment that the home that he had kind of changed around him. So he's kind of looking at his reflection. He's kind of thinking, well, is it me? Did I change? Or did everything else around me change? And it can ask us, what is it about your reflection that unnerves you? And we can get a token if we answer that. So I think about his reflection that unnerves him, perhaps it is that he kind of notices something that has changed. So perhaps he notices, like, I know that we are a Newt, so I'm not sure about Newt aging. Perhaps he just sort of notices that he is he's not the kind of young Newt that lived this happy life in his home. So the thing that unnerves him is that, like, he has changed, and perhaps starts to feel a little bit of doubt in himself. And I'll take a token for that, which I can use later on. So let's go back to Blue Meadow, which is the month. So we said that there is not good cheer around here, but we are seeing time to relax. And we can pick something else from over here that might help with that. Yeah, the distant sound of laughter. So perhaps we can hear laughter coming from the castle. So Newt will kind of head on up to the castle. And the sun's starting to come down. And he sort of heads into this. I'm imagining kind of like a semi-ruined castle. But, not so much of a ruin that we might think it's this ruined place that we're looking for. So, the castle is a place designed to keep everything else far outside its walls. So, this place can always keep someone from entering and give them a token. Now, it's impossible to do a scene of somebody trying to enter a castle without thinking of the Holy Grail, I think. But I'm going to do my best. So perhaps this laughter that we can hear from the parapets, perhaps, as we kind of get closer to investigate, we sort of recall this story that we've heard about the ghost on the parapets, and perhaps it's the ghost of the last guard that was kind of stationed at this castle. And there is a moat around this castle, and the laughter that we heard is now silent as we get closer. And perhaps Newt kind of calls up to the walls, tries throwing a rock at the bridge that's sort of lifted up to the gate, the drawbridge, and there's sort of no response at all. And we can only now assume that this castle is kind of abandoned, and perhaps we did hear the laughter of the ghost on the parapets. And with the sun going down, we're in a bit of a dangerous situation here. So we're going to look around to see if we can find anywhere that would be like a suitable place to set up camp for the night. And I do have a token, so let me have a look. So I can spend a token to do any of these things. So I can provide a solution for an aspect of a material or immediate problem. Ease someone's pain for only a moment. Keep someone safe from the difficulties of the world. Offer someone the chance to connect with you on a personal level. Find what someone needs to give them a chance to change. Reveal something hidden about the person in front of you. Know something important about the place you're in. Or listen to the shared wisdom of the many small and forgotten gods and ask what they tell you. So we haven't gone into these small and forgotten gods yet. That might be something we come into later. I think we can provide a solution for an aspect of a material or immediate problem. And the immediate problem is that this castle is clearly like abandoned and we don't have a way in. And I think the solution to this is that we can see there is a sort of small, I guess like a window, like one of these that we can see here in the artwork. There's one of them that we could perhaps kind of vault over this moat to get to. And, you know, we have our sturdy walking stick. So perhaps Newt kind of takes a step back, gets his sturdy walking stick and kind of vaults over this moat and kind of latches onto this window. Just enough to be able to kind of pull himself in and kind of, I mean, he's a Newt, so he can kind of slip through this gap and get into this kind of castle. And as we are inside, we're going to get a bit fancy now. So we are inside the castle, but we are still in this place that we are in, the combined sort of environment. We still have that more tag here. So we can use this to hint at something eerie. So we get in and this place it's not only just empty, it's been like cleared out, like it's vacant. It's kind of just its walls and the kind of, I guess the inner sort of keep of the castle is kind of just in ruins. So it's really just like a set of walls with a few watchtowers sort of along its walls. So we can hint at something eerie. Perhaps we sort of hear that sort of laughter again coming from the walls. And, you know, we'll take that shiver down our back as well. So we already had that folklore about the ghost on the parapets. And the thing with folklore is the book says that folklore doesn't need to be true, but it should never be disproven. So if I choose the lost army of the first queen, I don't have to include that as an actual real bit of this world. It could just be a story, but you're never going to like completely disprove it as fake, which is something that I like. So perhaps we can kind of mix this myth in. So perhaps we kind of look around this castle and poke around and we see that, yeah, this was the castle of the first queen. And the army was lost here. So in this setting, there was a war relatively recently that's now over. Perhaps I'm thinking this is from like a more distant war. So this has kind of been abandoned for quite some time. And the ghost that is here is kind of the last soldier from the lost army of the first queen. And I think we shouldn't get all the answers, but perhaps we kind of see a kind of ghostly figure in the parapets moving now, sort of patrolling the walls, laughing to themselves, perhaps. And I will I think we could we say this is like a small, no, this wouldn't be a small or forgotten god. But I think we can take a moment to watch a tiny moment of beauty. So perhaps we watch as the kind of mist. It's like I'm not picturing an actual ghost here. I'm picturing more like a sort of misty form moving between the kind of the walls, the turrets of the walls, and kind of like snaking around this kind of half-ruined castle. So I'll take a token for that. Now, as sort of interesting as this place is, I don't feel like it's a good place to perhaps set up camp for the night. So we are going to head back out into the moors. So we're going to get back to the other side of the moat, and perhaps it's kind of actual night time now. So we're going to look around and see what we can see. We could do somewhere for like a bit of shelter. I mean, we have a bit of, we do have a tent, presumably. So perhaps we kind of set up our camp in between some of these kind of gnarled trees. And let's go back to this bloom meadow and see what else we can see. Yeah, I think we're just going to set up the camp for the night, and we're going to use this to pause for a moment and get some rest, which we'll get as a token. So, Newt sets up his camp for the night and kind of manages to get some sleep. Perhaps kind of occasionally getting up to look out of his tent to sort of see if he can hear this laughter coming from the castle walls. And then it's the next morning. So the next morning we're going to move on. And obviously we're still in the moorland, but let's think about where we're kind of heading into. I'm trying to go, my like head is telling me to like hack these rules as I go, but I'm trying to like run this kind of by the book. But I like the idea of kind of as you travel, like some elements of the environment staying with you. So perhaps this more theme will continue, but we will perhaps bring in other natures. But I'll try and stick to having like three natures for each area. So we'll call this moorland, we'll call it Queen's Moor, because we had the Queen's Castle, didn't we? So I think we would like to go somewhere with some people there, because Queen's Moor has been a very lonely place. So perhaps we kind of reach a crossroads would seem natural, and I believe there is actually a crossroads. Did I imagine that? I could have sworn there was a crossroads. I think I'm thinking of the road. Well, you know what? Tavern sounds interesting. So perhaps we get to a crossroad, and I'm thinking market, tavern. I'm going to pick all three before I look at them. Market, tavern, and labyrinth is interesting. I'm going to pencil that in. And that's a slightly odd combination of three things, but we'll see how we get on. So the next morning we're met with this. We'll go with the waves of pollen. So wake up, and Newt is definitely going to be suffering from some hay fever. It's the only way I can sympathise with these characters, is to give them the exact same ailments that I would have. So, he wakes up and Bloom Meadow is in full bloom. It almost feels like as he sort of gets up and unfolds packs his tent back up, it's almost like the flowers have sort of begun to grow around his tent, even just overnight. So he kind of packs up his tent and gets ready to go on his way. And now that it's daylight, as he reaches kind of the top of a crest of a hill in this moorland, he can now see there is a sort of crossroads up ahead with, a signpost and even a little some kind of structure there, which would be our kind of tavern. So as we get closer to the tavern, we see a tavern is a place of simple comfort, often settled into while on the journey from one land to the next. Now, this place can always describe a small comfort, sow confusion among the disoriented, or offer someone comfort and amenities at a price. Give them a token if they refuse your offer. So in situations like this, some of these are like worded in a way that you have to kind of twist your brain a little bit to make sense of them. And this is one of them. It always takes me a minute to understand exactly what's being suggested here. And it's slightly tricky when you're in solo mode as well. But generally, if we were playing in a group, I might pick this up and say, okay, I'm going to offer your character some comfort and amenities at this tavern. And if you refuse that, then you get to take a token. So here I would be like performing both halves of that decision. So we kind of have an opportunity to get a token if we resist comfort. I think this place definitely has a cheerful innkeeper who you once called a family. We'll get back to that, because that will kind of tie into what we were talking about, this place that we used to live. And I'm seeing a huge fireplace with a big pot of stew. Now, in this world, all of the mammals and birds are like people, and the role of kind of livestock in this setting is carried out by bugs. So as we get closer to this tavern, we're kind of met with the smell of this stew, and Newt will definitely recognise it as kind of a as like an earwig stew, which is perhaps an old favourite of his, and perhaps a almost like a regional like dish of the place that he lived previously, his home. And as he kind of gets closer, he recognises the person that's stirring this big stew is somebody that he recognises from his hometown. Now, who are they? We're going to get an animal first, because I think like the animal gives you a lot of leverage. Now, we're not going to actually use these books. We're just using the sample animals. We're going to choose one. So let's go with the vagabond. So possum is like too good. Like possums are like the easy way out. So we're not going to go possum or rat. Rattlesnake is kind of interesting, and they have all been. We have had entirely reptiles so far, but I think I do like raven. So this character is called Raven, and Raven is stirring this big pot of earwig stew. And let's pick some traits for this guy. So I think you give him like 2 or 3 traits. I feel like a social one. They said he was like, was it friendly? I can't remember what they said. Let's do this by the book. So where's our tavern? A cheerful innkeep. So cheerful is a personal trait. So Raven is cheerful. So they can always look on the bright side. They can always whistle a chipper tune, and they can always gallivant into an awkward situation. So let's say Raven is like whistling, and we kind of like perhaps we kind of recognize the tune as well as we get closer. Newt kind of looks him over and thinks like, does he recognize me? Perhaps it's been a while. But no, he's, Ravens. I like the fact that the raven is kind of like the cheerful animal. I think that appeals to me for some reason. So this kind of very classically kind of gothic dark animal is actually very optimistic. So Raven's like, Newt, get over here, and he recognizes straight away. And what else does this guy have? I think he's passionate. No, don't like that so much. Friendly is a bit close to cheerful, I think. Intertwined. Oh, that's like a fancy one. I think we'll go with crafty. So perhaps Raven is cheerful and crafty. So Raven kind of welcomes Newt over. I guess he's a cook and a tavern owner. And he kind of like immediately starts slopping up this stew and like thrusting it in our faces. And we've been going on the bare minimum now for so long on this journey that, we just grab this and start shoveling it in. And then perhaps we remember that we're trying to be proper. So, he kind of takes the first few bites very quickly and then kind of stops and starts to eat a bit more properly. And, we can always chatter away. That's one of our things. So we kind of sit down with Raven. We're talking about our journey. We're talking about the old days back in the hometown. And, Raven's kind of... Yeah, so Raven is crafty. So he can reveal a plan they've had in motion that's paid off. So Raven explains that, he felt the same way about us. He left the town maybe a little bit before we did. and he felt like the town was changing, and he decided to, he had this plan to set up a tavern on this crossroads and sort of feed travelers, and it's paid off. He's made his business, and he's living his life here, meeting new people, helping travelers, and he can propose an alternate approach. So we've explained how we're looking for this ruin in this island, and we're just kind of trusting the road. But Raven says, yeah, you can trust the road, but this is a place where we get people traveling from all sorts of different places. And if you stayed here, spent maybe just one night here, we can have a catch up, and you might be able to talk to people who have travelled from all around, and you might be able to find out a bit more about this place without having to walk to every corner of the earth to find this. So yeah, Newt decides to stay. And so we ask Raven straight up, we say, look, do you think I'll find this place? Do you think I'll find this this ancient island, this ancient ruin? And I think, Raven is cheerful. So he can always look on the bright side. So Raven says, look, I don't know for sure whether you are going to find it. I can't see the future, but I think it's all about, I think you'll find what you need to find. You'll find, I found my place in this world, which is, running this tavern. And I think whatever you're doing on this pilgrimage, I think you'll find some answers to this question of, where is your home? So we decide to stay the night, helping out around the tavern, pay our way. But we said this tavern was also a market. So what does that mean? A market is a place where near anything can be traded and bartered, and where people from Heath gather with supplies to exchange. So perhaps every kind of evening, traders come in around this tavern and, set up a literal kind of market and sort of trade with each other. So we can describe what we find here. So yeah, what can we find? We've got some aesthetic elements. A familiar crafty merchant. Well, we're not going to... Raven is obviously there selling his stew. Confusing currencies. So yeah, perhaps these traders are all using... they come from all over, so they're using different currencies that we're not familiar with. Foreign wares. With after the war, I guess travel became a lot more viable. So we're seeing things that perhaps weren't available if we were growing up during this wartime. But we want to get by with the minimum. So as exciting as this whole thing is, we're not really in the buyer's market. We use it as a bit more of an opportunity to ask around. So rather than actually finding goods to buy, we find an answer as to this island. So we ask around, and one of the traders actually comes from somewhere that is near to an island that has a ruin on it, and there's lots of talk about how it's this ancient place. And yeah, this person is I like the idea of her being a wolf somehow. It makes her seem a bit untrustworthy, which is perhaps a bit unfair to wolves. But let's give her something. Let's say that she is the traumatized ones might be a bit weird for here. Inquisitive. So, she travels around and she perhaps sells, curiosities and, potions and just weird things that she's picked up from around the world. So she's picked up, this myth about this place that's near to where she's from. And she's going to focus on an irrelevant detail. So she says, yeah, it's the island that what can be the irrelevant detail of this island? Because kind of everything could be relevant. It's really hard to think of something that is definitely going to be irrelevant. Perhaps it's an island that she visited when she was a child, and when she was there, she tripped on a ruin and broke her ankle. And every time that she passes by this place, she shouts out a curse at it. But one time when she was doing that, another traveller told her this story about the island, which is that it's actually, one of the oldest places that exists. So we've got a bit of a lead on our island, at least. Now, we also said this place was a labyrinth. So before we hit the hay for the night, what does labyrinth do? A tangled maze used to trick, imprison, and confuse. Now, the good thing about this whole menu system, where you're kind of like picking bits from the menu for what you like, is that you can decide that something doesn't fit and you don't want it anymore. So perhaps the labyrinth represents like the map that we get from this wolf. So Wolf gives us a map and she kind of scrolls it down. But she's so busy focusing on this story about how she tripped and fell that she kind of like the path that she draws doesn't really make sense, and before you know it, she's gone. So we kind of have chalk marked directions and tangled paths kind of scrawled on this map, but it's a map that doesn't make much sense. So we have a map, but we don't really know what to do with it. So anyway, we'll hit the sack for tonight, and that means tomorrow we have a lead. At least we have this map, and I think we will leave that there for tonight in terms of the actual gameplay. But again, just to remind people, this is a game called Wanderhome by J Dragon. If any of this has been interesting, I'd recommend picking up the PDF at least, because it's the other thing that leapt at me when I was going back through this in preparation for this game tonight. So let me just maximize this. Is I've sort of joked around about how with Electric Bastionland I wanted to make a game that had the highest ratio of stuff to rules. So having like a really small rules section, but then like a big book just full of stuff to actually use. Well, this game actually gets pretty close, because you've got it depends whether you count these as like rules, these character classes, but I don't think I would. So even if you're including things like the seasons and all this guidance, the entire section for how to play the game is like 38 pages, 45 pages, I guess, if you go to there, out of 254 pages. And these are pages that are laid out very, very sparsely in places, in a good way, I should say. So if you want a game with like a whole world inside it, this is pretty cool. I think we'll see about whether next week I'll carry it on. I think I've used enough of this now to like get a sense of how it feels, and it is a cool exercise. Sorry, calling it an exercise sounds like very faint praise, but it feels very different to like what I normally feel after playing an RPG. It does feel more like kind of a like a world building activity, I guess, and kind of like a narrative kind of challenge to create this narrative and to create these in not providing much conflict in there. It kind of forces you to get creative with the conflict yourself, which I do find quite interesting. I would really like to try this out with a group, because I think as much as I have enjoyed doing it solo, I think even just having two people would make this a very different experience, because you'd be able to play off each other's characters a bit more and kind of dig into each other's characters, because I'm a little bit kind of like I don't tend to play like deep character pieces when I play games. So I think my instinct is to kind of focus on the world and the exploration. But I think if someone pushed me, we could get to a more interesting place with Newt, and I could push somebody else's character and ask some interesting questions about them. So who knows? Maybe this is something we'll come back to with another person. But for now, I think we're going to say Wanderhome, a really fun experience. And again, this is a game by J Dragon. You can check it out for yourselves. As always, if you've enjoyed this stream, you can find out more about what's going on with my games at bastionland.com. If you want to support these streams and the podcasts and blog posts and all that, you can go to patreon.com/bastionland. And next week, we will be back to the Tuesday slot, and I will be doing potentially another read-through of something different. I'm enjoying these read-throughs. This isn't going to be like the new standard. I'm not going to be doing read-throughs forever. But when I'm doing like a little sort of mini series like this, I find it quite useful to do a few in a row. So I'm going to be looking at a different game or a different book next week. I have 3 lined up, and maybe I'll do a poll actually, because if you sign up to our Patreon, you will get access to the voting on the polls. So I think I'll put it to the vote, and we'll see which one our patrons want to see for next week's stream. But we'll be back on Tuesday, 9 p.m. BST, and until then, it's goodbye for now.